Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are in the country today. My name is Jennifer Marcelli. I am the Program Area Manager for Foster Care for the Capacity Building Center for States. After reviewing the housekeeping details and the agenda for today's event, we'll be playing a video. You will be seeing this pop up on your screen shortly. For today's agenda, in a moment, we will hear some voices from the field about what foster care as a support to families, not a substitute for parents, means to them. Then we will get to hear from Assistant Secretary Johnson. We will then view the Mosaic digital stories called It Takes a Village. Collaboration is key to supporting families, stories from Hancock, Mississippi. Associate Commissioner Milner will then interview our guests, and then we'll have an opportunity to do Q&A, so please enter questions in the chat throughout today's event. We will then hear some closing remarks from Associate Commissioner Milner and hear about a resource from the Capacity Building Center for States. We will turn it over to the video.
We need foster care to be a place where children and families can grow and heal and be reunified. We need foster families and resource families who can support birth families and children during this time.
I have been fostering for almost 10 years, and it has been such an incredible journey watching the way that foster care has changed into a support and not a substitute for families.
33 years ago, not many relatives or kin were used, to today's foster care where kinship is really our focus.
And we utilize the resources and the communities, wrap around those families and ensure that they have natural supports that are built through the local communities.
It just makes a whole lot of sense to make sure that the services and supports that are driven for families first, and that should be the priority.
The statement, foster care is a support, not a substitute, to me shows how much foster care has grown within the past 20 years of even my existence. I'm 24 now, and I was a former foster youth, and being able to see how much families are more considered within the case planning, within what they want to see within our future, and how the needs of not just the child's met, but the family is met, to be able to provide a way to end the cycles that are continuously happening and preventing the children and future generations from facing the same issues that they have.
I adopted my son out of the foster care system in 2014. The entire time that he was with me, up until the last 3 months, everything was geared toward reunification and trying to make sure that he was able to be with his family. It didn't turn out that way, and I adopted my son, and we still go back to New Mexico twice a year so that he can visit his family, because I feel like that's super important.
Foster care is a tremendous support and not at all a substitute. Foster parents are there to foster their child, and not only are they fostering the child, they're fostering relationships with the parents during that time.
I wholeheartedly believe that the key to success in bringing about better outcomes for our children and youth is that we will have foster families be that bridge and that support, and see themselves as the agent of change that is creating the kind of love and success and stability in these families.
I work in family court as a juvenile services manager, and when I think about foster care and our system in Alabama, I think about the opportunity that foster parents and foster care workers really have the ability to be an asset in a child's life.
I like to tell foster parents that they're here to stand shoulder to shoulder with the parent. I invite them to be a member of the team.
And I think that's the role that foster parents can play in the lives of birth families. Help them and walk alongside them and express confidence in them. Speak life into their life.
Well, good day. This is Jerry Milner with the Children's Bureau, and I absolutely want to welcome all of you to our annual National Foster Care Month event. The theme for Foster Care Month this year, as it was last year, is foster care as a service to entire families, not as a substitute for parents. That stems from our national vision for child welfare in our country that has been informed over the last 4 years by visits with young people who've been a part of the foster care system, with parents who have lived experience, and with resource families, with courts, with others who have given us the inspiration and the firm commitment that foster care can, in fact, be a support for entire families out there. So we are grateful that you're able to join us today to celebrate that vision and the work that we're doing in that area. It's my pleasure now to introduce you to Lynn Johnson, who is the Assistant Secretary of the Administration for Children and Families as a part of the Department of Health and Human Services. There is no greater advocate for families, for children, for young people than our Assistant Secretary. She has personally championed and continues to champion permanency for our young people in the foster care system and stability and the ability to thrive for their entire families. She is enthusiastic, she's knowledgeable, she's passionate about the work. She's been on the front lines. She knows the families, the young people out there by name. She knows their stories, their struggles, and their successes. And she brings that vision, that compassion, that understanding to the work that we do. It's an incredible pleasure for all of us in the Administration for Children and Families to be able to work under her leadership and under her guidance. So I'd like to turn things over to you now, Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be invited to speak today at the National Foster Care Month event. What an exciting group of people that have joined this call. It looks like we could do better by doing virtual conferences than even when we get together. These numbers are fantastic. I appreciate every single thing that each and every one of you does. And I want to share with you that each year the Children's Bureau, under the Administration for Children and Families, sets the national theme for recognition of National Foster Care Month, held in May. The Children's Bureau enters the second year of the 2-year effort titled Foster Care as a Support to Families, Not a Substitute for Parents. And that's to emphasize the importance of children remaining with their families, of working authentically with parents and relatives, and to raise awareness about the enormous opportunity out-of-home care providers have to help heal, to care, and to reunite the families that they serve. This year's National Foster Care Month campaign focuses on engaging the legal and judicial system to make sure families have access to needed services, eliminating unnecessary out-of-home stays, and when necessary, ensuring placements are in the child's best interest by prioritizing placements with family members and keeping children in their schools and communities whenever that is possible. Integrating youth and parent voices in permanency planning, court hearings, and community advocacy. Hearing those voices, it is so important to listen loudly, is what I like to say. It's one thing to just listen. It's another thing to listen loudly and to act on what you hear. And by walking our talk to listen and act, we will make such a huge difference. We also are encouraging collaborative relationships between birth parents and foster parents, and between child welfare professionals and the families they serve, to promote reunification and family engagement to improve all of our outcomes. The Children's Bureau supports a dedicated website for National Foster Care Month at www.childwelfare.gov/fostercaremonth/. There is a wide outreach space with a growing list of partners that share our messaging and contribute to our campaign, including the National Foster Parent Association, Foster Club, Foster Care Alumni of America, and other federal and state partners. There are so many to mention that I just want to thank everybody for joining together to care for America's kids. There were just over 437,000 children and youth in foster care during fiscal year 2018, according to AFCAR's data. According to the 2018 report, parental neglect was at 62% and parental drug use 36%. Those were the two most cited reasons for children being removed from their homes. We want to encourage that everyone, that as we think of neglect, that we don't think that means that just because you're poor, you should have a child removed from your home. We can use all sorts of funding, employment assistance, mental health training, substance abuse assistance to help promote healthy and thriving families so they're not in poverty, so they're not low income, rather than remove their kids. That is a real priority for us in this administration. Let me talk for a minute about the Family First Transition and Support Act that was signed into law in December of 2019. This promotes the implementation of the Family First Prevention Services Act of 2018. We know that that act allows states to use matching federal funds for services that help keep families together and reduce the need for foster care, mental health services, substance use treatment, family counseling, parenting skills, and education. More specifically, Family First intends to encourage kinship care when out-of-home care is required by providing federal funds for evidence-based programs that support relative caregivers. It also requires states to show how their foster care licensing standards accommodate relative caregivers. It allows for the use of funds under the Promoting Safe and Stable Families program to provide unlimited family reunification services for children in foster care and funds for an additional 15 months once they've been reunified. It establishes a competitive grant program for the recruitment and support of high-quality foster families to help place more children in homes rather than congregate care. The recently signed Family First Transition and Support Act will free up funds and incentivize states to transition to a more prevention-oriented system, so there are fewer children entering our foster care system. Those provisions include a phasing in through 2025 of the 50% well-supported requirement for the reimbursement of prevention services, while states develop the research base for prevention programs. It includes transition funding of $500 million to help states implement Families First and offset its startup costs. It includes short-term funding certainty for states with expiring waivers and expanded funding for kinship care services. And lastly, the renaming of Part 2 of Title 4B as the Mary Lee Allen Promoting Safe and Stable Families Program. Our belief at the Administration for Children and Families is to prevent the need for children to be placed out of homes. Should children have to be removed from home to ensure their safety, we know our foster resource system will provide the most caring support. We value each and every foster parent and all that is done to care for our children and our youth. So thank you all again for listening and being here for our children and our youth and their families. Thank you very much, and back to you, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Johnson. You've been so supportive of the work of the Children's Bureau and child welfare systems across the nation. We're really appreciative of your message today in recognition of National Foster Care Month, but also of your ongoing support. Thank you for your vision and your leadership. My name is Taffy Campaign, and I have the privilege of serving as the National Foster Care Specialist here at the Children's Bureau within the Administration for Children and Families. I really want to thank all of you participants, all of you in our audience for sharing your time with us, and again, I want to say welcome to you. Each May, we do take time to recognize the families, the parents, the children and youth whose lives we touch as a foster care system. And we also want to acknowledge family members, relatives, and kin caregivers, foster parents, mentors, policymakers, so many child welfare professionals and other members of the local communities who can and do help children and youth in foster care find a sense of stability during such a difficult time. They help to maintain important connections and especially to return children home whenever possible. Preventing the need for foster care and the trauma of removal is our number one important goal. And while foster care should be the last resort for maintaining child safety when it's necessary, we have a responsibility to strengthen families' abilities to care for their children in their homes. We have a responsibility to reduce the inherent trauma of removal and also to honor a family-centered approach in meeting families' needs. So as our Associate Commissioner Jerry Milner has stated in the past, we must change a fundamental misperception about families involved with child welfare and their circumstances. The more that we're able to put information out there, the greater opportunity the general public will have to think much more humanely about families who need help and who find themselves in difficult situations. Raising awareness is fundamental. So what I'd like to do now is just hold a quick poll to learn a little bit more about who our audience is today. If you'll answer our question, what role do you have in supporting families? We'd appreciate your vote. Of course, we're always well supported and in great connection with all the child welfare professionals out there, and we see quite a bit of child welfare staff, administrators, program managers. We're also seeing some folks from the courts, some parents' attorneys, parent advocate, agency attorneys. We've got some folks from the CASA programs on board. This is great. And if you'll also look at the numbers there, we've got a lot of participants on the call today, and it looks like representing quite a bit of the many stakeholders for foster care. So we really want to thank you all for being with us today. I think for the next part of our program, we're also going to turn our attention specifically to court and child welfare collaborations supporting families and supporting reunification. We're going to start with a very inspiring 10-minute digital story mosaic. The Children's Bureau has developed a digital story video series where persons involved with, working in, or supporting foster care record short personal videos with their own photos, images, music, and narrative, so they can really share their own personal perspectives, and it's from across many foster care experiences. This year we created two collections that we also call digital story mosaics, focusing on collaborating with the courts. One mosaic is from New York City with the Center for Family Representation, highlighting the multidisciplinary team approach. And the other, which we'll present to you today, is from Hancock County, Mississippi County Youth Court. So this court mosaic that we'll be watching today, titled "It Takes a Village, Collaboration is Key to Supporting Families," gives us several perspectives on one family's journey to reunification. Highlighted throughout this collection is the collaboration that has been created by Hancock County Youth Court, the Mississippi Department of Child Protective Services, and local community organizations that all came together to provide coordinated services to assist in reunification. There are actually 7 stories that make up this mosaic. We'll provide you information to where you could go and look at these and any other of the many digital videos that we have. And so for now, we're going to view 4 of the stories of Hancock County reunification in our next video. Thank you.
People used to tell me the horrors of Child Protective Services. Just hearing the words would make me cringe. And soon the day would come that we would breathe the words, "Our children are in state custody." My husband and I were like any other couple, hardworking and struggling to find our place in this world. We were new parents trying to cope with not 1 or 2, but 3 beautiful children. Soon the stress of it all would pile up so high it would become unbearable. It started off small, like most things do, and would soon turn into our own horror story. Things got so out of hand, and our mistake was not asking for proper help. And today we know that in some situations, people do care and want what's best for you. We traveled down a dark, selfish road for a while. Once our addiction put its claws in us, not much mattered after that. As we hit bottom, some surprising outside sources would step in and step up for our family. Our first visit would be from Child Protective Services. They gave us the rundown of who, what, where, when, and why. My husband and I couldn't take the same road of recovery together. There was so much damage and hurt that we had to take a step back and address our own inner demons. The day we stepped in Judge Favre's court, we felt a sense of peace. He had the warmest smile, and soon he would become a part of our lives. We had monthly court hearings that showed him our progress. He never downed us for mistakes or belittled us. When we weren't in court, we had relationships with CASA and many community agencies. They helped us adjust to being parents again. Today, we have our children back and all the confidence in the world to give our children the lives they deserve. Knowing we can call any one of these wonderful people for help gives us hope for our future.
How could anyone let their kids get taken? Those are the words I've always said until I found out how easy it was to fall down the dark path of addiction. Not knowing what my kids were thinking, how scared they were, and not being able to talk to them made me feel that this was going to be impossible to get through. I felt lost, scared, and alone. When I talked to my caseworker, since I had never been involved with Child Protective Services, I realized no one was against me and they wanted me to succeed. At the first court meeting with Judge Favre, it felt like he really understood my situation. He listened and worked with me in order to complete my service plan. We had monthly court hearings, so we were not wondering what was happening with our children. Everyone involved in our case was on the same page. Judge Favre increased the visits with our children so that we could maintain our relationship with them. Even though there were speed bumps along the way, it felt like he had high hopes for us. Although there were a lot of things on my service plan, I didn't look at it as just things to do, but things I needed to do to become a better parent. I went to rehab, parenting classes, and anger management classes, and maintained regular contact with everyone involved in our case. The visit with my children brought up a ball of feelings ranging from excited to sad, knowing that they would be going home with their foster parents. Seeing our children's faces when they arrived gave me the push to do whatever I had to do to have my beautiful babies returned. When we walked into the last court hearing with Judge Favre, everyone had a smile on their faces. It felt like that dark path we went down was much brighter and we were a family again. Looking back on everything we went through reminds me that anyone can overcome anything with the right resources. I know all I have to do is ask.
My name is Lanie Roussel, and I am the parent attorney. I always knew that I wanted to be an attorney and work in the child welfare system. I wanted to have a major impact on the lives of children who could not advocate for themselves in bad situations. I have love for children and a passion for helping. I never thought about the position of the parent attorney as advocating for the child. I was wrong. Parents have a right to their children, but children have a right to their parents. I constantly get asked, how do you represent people who do this or put their kids through this? The simple answer is it's my job. But I work with good parents who are in bad situations. Every day I challenge the cookie-cutter assumption of how parenting should look. I take a different approach, a collaborative one. This job is more than just sitting in a courtroom. I make sure to go to every family team meeting, interact regularly with Child Protective Services, CASA, attend special education meetings with my parents, collaborate with other county resources, and travel to meet my parents at rehabs, hospitals, work, or home. Catherine and Brian's case was one of the first cases I inherited in my career as a parent attorney and my first reunification case. When I began prepping for their case, I heard that Catherine was angry and frustrated with the process. She felt like she wasn't being heard or advocated for. After meeting with them, I knew they wanted their children more than anything, and these children deserved them. I told them I was 100% here for them and only them. 4 months later, they were reunified with their children. I will never forget that day. Judge Favre praised the extensive work and accomplishments that they completed throughout the obstacles and barriers that they had to overcome. When Judge awarded legal and physical custody back to them, it was the moment I realized that this is all worth it. Since that day, I am determined to reunify as many families as I can. There is no greater feeling than to know that you have made one of the biggest and most meaningful differences in someone's life.
I didn't bring any child welfare experience to the bench when I took office in January 2018. I knew I could quickly learn the law, but what I worried about most was getting it right. The right mix of legal knowledge and compassion. I understood the power I had over parents because I had their most valuable possession, their children. I knew I needed to connect with parents on the most basic human level. Parents are broken, ashamed, angry, or frightened when they first come to court. They need to see a face that shows love and concern, to hear a voice that cares. Most of all, they need to hear that I am ready to help them restore their family. I promised myself very early on I would never count a parent out. At my core, I know that every parent is redeemable. With the right path in place, parents can be reunified with their children. Brian and Catherine came into court angry at each other and their circumstances. They were at rock bottom with so many issues. Would they trust me with their hearts? I had to connect and gain their trust immediately. They wanted something different because of their love for their children. Once we connected, I looked forward to the monthly hearings. While there were challenges, they were able to show progress. At times, they were overwhelmed. Their caseworker, attorney, and CASA provided encouragement, as did the court. The monthly hearings allowed them to share their progress and be encouraged, giving them hope. The most memorable moment is when their children came to court. Being able to observe their loving bond was compelling evidence. Little Eli climbed up on his daddy's lap. As Brian began to cry, Eli looked up at his father's face and brushed away a tear from his cheek. To this day, that image is a monument of hope in my heart. On the day their case closed, everyone was so proud. We were all transformed through their process. We will be forever connected because of the collaboration instilled by this court. Their story is a testament to the court's philosophy of giving parents hope.
Hello, this is Kathy Campaign again. Now what I'd like to do is introduce you to our special guests. We've got Jerry Milner, who's the Associate Commissioner at the Children's Bureau, formerly serving as the Vice President for Child Welfare Practice at the Center for the Support of Families, where he assisted state and local child welfare agencies in evaluating their child welfare programs. Dr. Milner comes to ACF with direct state-level experience as well. During his tenure as State Child Welfare Director in Alabama, he led efforts to reform child welfare practice according to systems of care principles. In addition to those positions, Dr. Milner worked in the Children's Bureau to implement and manage the Child and Family Services reviews of state child welfare service programs. Dr. Milner brings 43 years of practice, management, and technical assistance experience in child welfare at the local, state, and federal levels. We also have Judge Trent Favre. He was appointed by Governor Phil Bryant in late 2017 to serve as Hancock County's first county court judge. He presides over youth court matters, including abuse, neglect, and delinquency. He also oversees a general civil litigation docket. Judge Favre graduated from Millsaps College in 1996 and the University of Mississippi School of Law in 1999. He has served as a board member to various organizations, including United Way of South Mississippi, Hancock Chamber, and the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, which he chaired. In 2019, he was named Mississippi's 2019 Champion for Children for the Judicial Branch and the Child Welfare and Child Advocacy Committee of the Mississippi Bar. They recognize him as a reunification hero for the state of Mississippi. He currently serves on Mississippi's Court Improvement Team. Most recently, he was named the sole recipient of the Mississippi Bar's Judicial Excellence Award. And also, he is married to Shannon, and they are proud parents of Katie and Sam. And we will also have with us Lanie Roussel. She was approved by the Hancock County Board of Supervisors to serve families as the full-time parent attorney in 2019. She spends her time serving families through the legal process, collaborating with community resources and agencies, and maintaining constant connection with her clients. Prior to, she spent 2 years practicing in several areas of law, but focused primarily on divorce and child custody law. She's also a certified guardian ad litem. Lanie graduated from the University of Louisiana in Monroe in 2014 and the University of Dayton School of Law in 2017. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Associate Commissioner, Jerry Milner.
Well, thank you so much, Taffy, and what an incredible video that was that we've just had a chance to see. It's outstanding. So pleased to be here with you, Judge Favre, and with you, Lanie, to talk about the work that happened in Hancock County, Mississippi, past less than 3 years, actually. I have to say, beyond a doubt, there's nobody I'd rather be celebrating National Foster Care Month with than the two of you. Having visited your court and knowing personally so much about the work that you're doing down there. Some people out there, including me, call this the Mississippi Miracle. And I just want to thank both of you very much for coming here and being willing to share some of that experience with us today. Judge Favre, we'll start with you with a few questions. I think we have a sense of this from the video already, but I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about your judicial philosophy and your approach to the bench.
Sure. I guess you can tell from the video I love what I do. I love my job. It's a mission, and I'm happy to serve. I wanted to just as a introduction state that when I took the bench 2.5 years ago, we had 389 children in custody, and the population of our county is not even 50,000. So a disproportionate number of children in custody. I'm happy to report today that we have 72 children in custody, and that's an 80% reduction in just a short 2.5 years. I do attribute, thank you, and I appreciate the resources you've provided to us and helping us achieve that goal. I think a lot of this is attributable to my judicial philosophy, and I think I speak in terms of how I operate in court, but I think it's a permeation of our whole system. My judicial philosophy has been primarily and largely influenced by my belief that every parent, every human is redeemable. Our courtroom is filled with paintings incorporating the word hope. You can see one of them I brought in behind me there so you can see what that looks like, but creating an atmosphere of hope in the courtroom. Actually, we went and looked at the aesthetics of the courtroom to make sure that we're communicating in every way we can that we support parents. But hope is our focus word. It is the hope that lives within me that compels me to instill hope in the lives of others. And I understand that we live in a broken world. And I also believe that, like Ms. Roussel said, that children have a right to their parents, and parents have a right to their children. And it's the parents and children we see in youth court that are in incredibly difficult situations, and often their flaws are on display for everyone to see. So that's an incredibly shaming position to be in. They come in with very little hope, and at least that was the way it was in the beginning. I think people, the word is out that there is hope when you come in the courtroom. But being compassionate and empathetic gives families the hope that they need to do what they need to do to reunify with their children. So connecting with families on the most basic human levels gives families hope. When they have hope, they can step out of that shame. They can achieve their goals. I can only imagine what it would be like for me to have to sit in that same position, to have my brokenness, the things in my life that are not so good on display in the courtroom. And for that reason, I think a great degree of compassion and empathy is needed to connect with families, to connect with children and parents, not just in the courtroom, but throughout the entire child welfare system. Every parent and child should leave my courtroom convinced and believe that they have a chance at reunification, and that I am going to support them through their journey.
That's just exceptional, and there could be no question that having that kind of philosophy in the courtroom has a tremendous impact on the experience that parents and children will have there. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about how you see the purpose of the dependency court and what the role of the judge is in these types of proceedings.
So there are so many different roles. I think clearly the role is to mend broken families, but we mend broken families while we keep children safe. We have done a lot of training in trauma, becoming a trauma-informed court. We've done a lot of training on assessing safety and risk for children. So the role of the court is to harness the resources of your community and bring those in to support the family so that we can fix the issues that brought the children into custody and maintain safety for the child during that process. The shift has kind of changed, I think, nationwide to keep more children in home, to challenge courts and communities to prevent removal. And so, we are shifting with that. And as we have looked at our court processes, we understand that keeping children in the home is important. So we are constantly evaluating ways that we can keep children in the home and provide services to families in an in-home setting.
That's outstanding. Well, you've obviously had changes in the outcomes. Can you tell us a little bit about what some of the specific changes that you've made in the court since taking the bench 2.5 years ago?
Sure, and I've been reading the comments from the participants on the chat, and I see a lot of people want more information about the monthly hearings that we do because they were mentioned in the video. So that's kind of the area of focus I would like to talk about. So it couldn't happen right away with the responsibilities that I have as a youth court judge and also presiding over a civil docket. Given the volume at the beginning, it was very difficult to meet with the families as frequently as we do now. But I saw very early on that there was value in seeing families more frequently. For example, if you don't see them frequently, then you may learn about some hiccup in the case or something that went wrong in the case, and you've lost valuable time in trying to get the team assembled to fix that issue. So about midway through my first year, I realized that monthly hearings would be more beneficial for the families. And I'd point out as well that children were not participating in their hearings prior to my tenure. So increasing the involvement of the child was important to me, to hear their voice specifically. Even though we have an incredible CASA chapter here in Hancock County, I wanted to hear and see the child and let them know that they can have ownership in their outcome. Once we moved to monthly permanency hearings on reunification cases, I could see so many different things happening from different perspectives, and I'll walk through those with you. From the parent perspective, you could hear the parent Brian say he didn't have to wonder what was going on because he was able to come monthly. He could hear what was going on in his case. He would hear what's happening with his children. So it gave parents hope that the process is designed to work in their favor. They don't have to wonder what's going on. The parents became more accountable to the process. The parents had more opportunities to show their progress. On the other side of the coin, if there was regression, if they weren't able to show progress, then we were able to think through why not progress? What can we do to assist you? And let the parent voice that issue. Why can't they make it to their drug screen? Why can't they get their counseling done? Is there something more we can do to help the parent in that process? So having these more contemporaneous hearings allowed us to problem solve the issues for the parent. From the child's perspective, it gave children more input in their case. Children, when age appropriate, of course, can see the parent's progress or lack thereof. I think that's an important thing for the kids to see, in particular for the Morans. You know, their children can come in and hear what their mom and dad did to achieve reunification. Seeing that from a child's perspective, I think, is very important, to know that their parent is working and that they have tasks to achieve in order to achieve a safe reunification. From the perspective of the CPS worker, unfortunately, it meant increased work, right? They had to do more reporting, so providing a monthly report. But this, I think, promotes diligence. It promotes quick follow-up on the issues you've heard in the last court hearing. We talk a lot about reasonable efforts in this day and age. And so on a monthly basis, we're examining the reasonable efforts that the agency has used to achieve the plans that are in place. So naturally, if you're seeing the case month to month, then you're going to hear the efforts of those caseworkers more frequently. From the perspective of CASA, it increases the contact with the child and ensures that the voice of the child is heard more frequently and with emphasis. That's important because sometimes, as important as these parents are to me, we could get so focused on the parent's case plan or their service agreement and not really focus on the child. But I'm very concerned about the children and their welfare and making that determination about the appropriateness of their placement and the restrictions of their placement. And so CASA gives us the voice of the child, telling us the wishes of the child. And I often say when I speak across the state that more information is good information. We can make better decisions with more information. So CASA provides that information for us. And lastly, from the court's perspective, if you haven't figured it out already, I love people. And so I value that connection with the families. I want to speak into their lives and be involved in their lives and let them know I'm committed to their success. So providing more court hearings gives me more opportunity to connect with them, to learn more about the family and speak into their lives, provides more opportunities to determine whether the children can be safely returned. That is a question we ask at every hearing. Can the children be safely returned to the parents today? If not, explain why they cannot be returned today. If they can't be safely returned and there are issues, then we can vocalize those issues in the courtroom for the parent to hear and get on a clear path to alleviate the issues that prevent a safe return. So these monthly hearings, I think, are just important to developing the relationship and the dynamic for the families we support.
Outstanding. I'm sure a huge question, looking at some of the chat room comments here and just knowing who's on the line, a huge question is, how did you go about creating such a collaborative court system there in Hancock County?
So I think, one, that can be your expectation. The power of the bench obviously has some effect. So creating the expectation of collaboration, voicing that among the stakeholders that we will collaborate, we will work together, that's very important. But team building and collaboration, I guess, is one of the things that comes to me easily. Recognizing that I took over a broken system, I knew very early on that I needed to draw on the talent of the various agencies and bring them all together to the table to improve outcomes. The courtroom was being used as a place to fight battles between agencies and stakeholders, and I decided that it was better to leave those conflicts out of the courtroom and that our focus should be on the family and the children. I did not want the courtroom to be used for anything else, to take our eyes off the best interests of the child and the restoration of the families. So collaboration is a big piece of the success that we've had here, and collaboration is born out of relationships. So I have to work on my relationships, but not only do I have to work on my relationships with the people I work with, I have to make sure that all the stakeholders are working on their relationships. One of my main responsibilities is to make sure that these relationships are in balance and between the court and the agencies. And so I use a metaphor, I apologize, but it seems to resonate with some people, but I use the analogy or the metaphor of a pool. If you're a pool owner, you'll quickly get this, but it's a lot of work to keep the water clear and the pool clean. And so I refer to myself sometimes as the pool boy, because I think the system is very similar. There's a lot of work to keep the conflict out of the system and to make sure that people are collaborating. So I see myself as the person that needs to be in tune with all the stakeholders and know what's happening out there. And a lot of times, empowering people to resolve conflicts on their own first before I speak. And so many times if I hear that there is an issue between any of the agencies, what I will do is go back to that first point and point out that I expect a resolution, that you come to the table with that person or that entity and you work through your issue. And then if not, if it can't be resolved, then I'll step in to assist. Initially, I knew I needed to build relationships with CPS and with CASA. There were close to 80 cases that had procedural defects or problems, so we immediately began to collaborate and bird dog those cases. But from that, I realized that I needed to meet monthly with CPS and CASA. So we continued that process, and these are separate meetings. So I'll meet with CPS on a monthly basis, their supervisors, and also with CASA, and then sometimes we'll come together to discuss issues. I think it's important to have a safe venue for agencies to communicate openly with me about the processes. I'm not immune from mistakes, and so I want feedback if things aren't going well. I do a yearly survey for all the stakeholders to give me feedback about how the court processes are working, and almost like a satisfaction survey. So that gives me some feedback on things I need to work on. You know, we're all in this together, so I believe it's equally important to listen to the stakeholders as it is to set expectations. And from these meetings, we've been able to get on the same page, coalesce around training standards or other issues, and the smaller meetings have allowed us to develop our relationships. Communication is key, and more important to communication, more opportunity to communicate outside of court has given me a better understanding of the individuals I work with who make up the various agencies. So training has been key. We have been engaged in many multidisciplinary training opportunities, which has allowed us all to work from the same playbook. From system-wide training, I've observed both individual and agency growth, as well as interpersonal and interagency relationship growth. Monthly, I meet with a group, and we call it the PAT group, but it's Partners at the Table. And these monthly meetings, which have kind of not happened as frequently or in the same venue since COVID, we've been doing them via Zoom. But this is a lunch meeting that I have once a month, and any stakeholder is allowed to participate. Mostly the heads of these agencies, we coalesce around the table, have lunch, relax, there's no agenda, and we talk about what we're working on, what our goals are. Sometimes I'll throw out a question like, if you could have anything in the world, what would it be? And we talk about what our goals are, what our wishes are, and that has built a dynamic that has really propelled us forward. And it gives each partner the ability to talk about their agency, to discuss needs and opportunities, but also to problem solve. And it is not uncommon for people to leave the meeting walking out together saying, let me get that for you, or I've done that before, can I help you with that, or I have a form, I'll send it over to you. So it yields immediate results every month, but it also just systemically builds the relationships that we need in our community.
That's outstanding. Just really admirable. Can you talk a little bit about how you're using data to measure the outcomes there?
So yes, I can talk about anything, Dr. Milner. I probably talk too much. But I use data in a variety of ways. I do love data. I have even spreadsheets that I've created for myself. I think it's important for me to see the names of the children that we serve on a regular basis. So I do love to just glance through the names of those children as much as I can. I try to do it daily. But I use data in particular to improve court processes. I'm particularly fond of compliance data. So that's available through Mississippi's MyKid system, which is our document storage system. And I think compliance data gives you opportunities to find areas of growth. While we've enjoyed success, I'm certain we can do so much better. And you can find great nuggets of areas for improvement in data, in particular compliance data. So it's important because we can measure how court adheres to timelines, for example. And if we're not adhering to timelines, which are very important, right, to moving children to permanency, if we're not looking at those timelines, then we're not getting good outcomes for our children and families. So achieving these timely permanency outcomes is always in the best interest of the children, and it's something I feel like we should focus on.
Yeah, outstanding. It's certainly consistent with our Assistant Secretary's focus on permanency for our kids in foster care as well. There's so much for you to be proud of that's happened down there. I wonder if there's anything you'd want to highlight about particular changes that you're the most proud of?
Sure. So one of the things that was born out of just the reduction of the number of children in custody was the opportunity to convert a resource in our county. So as the number of children in custody decreased, we had this opportunity to reevaluate a lot of our services in Hancock County. But for an example, because the removal rate was so high before, it was necessary for our county to have an emergency children's shelter. And at that time, it was called Brenda's House. And the county committed to this shelter several years ago to address the issue of the just high volume of children coming into custody. Well, as our numbers decreased, the budgetary numbers didn't work out anymore, and I caught wind of this, and through some other leadership in our county, we started thinking about a way to convert that asset to something better. And the county had purchased the actual building, so I knew they didn't want to unload the building just after they bought it. So we stabilized our system, and we took a step back, and we thought about the best way to use that resource. And we began having these discussions to make a better commitment to families and to preserve that investment. So we rebranded the shelter as a family center, and it's the first of its kind in the state of Mississippi. So Brenda's House is now a hub of family-centered activities and practices. Our main goal was to have really a place for meaningful and more frequent family time, to get out of the sterile office environment of Child Protective Services. No slight to them, they just didn't have the place to really do a meaningful visitation or family time. So having Brenda's House is a home, and it has a kitchen and living room and a backyard to play in. So the vision was, wow, wouldn't it be nice if children could go bake cupcakes with mom, or even have a birthday party there. So we've been able to increase the quantity and quality of visitation, but we've also been able to create that family-friendly environment. There's a social worker that works there that's able to counsel and visit with the parents to provide them guidelines or tips on how to have better visitation. They provide meals for parents and children. They also provide transportation for one or the other. Transportation is an issue. And they also provide very important court reports to the court. So if we have time, I'd love for you to see a short video clip about Brenda's House Family Center.
Absolutely.
Here in one of the bedrooms of our visitation center. This is the building where we conduct our visitations for parents and children, and also we can conduct sibling visitations or visitations between grandparents and grandchildren. We knew we needed to do more for families in terms of providing better resources for them in visitation. They were having to conduct supervised visitations in their office. They had a small, sterile office with no toys. It just really wasn't a place where a parent and child could enjoy themselves and get to bond and connect. And so what we have now is a home environment for these families to conduct visitation. They can do so many things that they would do in their home. For example, have a birthday party at the visitation center. We've had a mom bake cookies with her child. They can eat there together as a family. One of the things that I like a lot is the fact that there is a social worker there. And so for parents that are interested, they can meet with the social worker in advance of their scheduled time and talk about maybe things that would make their visit more productive. One of the other things that makes the visitation center so helpful to parents is the increased frequency of visits. There's no cookie cutter visitation schedule. When the issue of visitation comes up in a hearing, a referral is made to the visitation center and an intake is done, and then visitation center is able to design visitation that meets the needs of the parents, considers their work schedule, also considers transportation issues. So this is a wonderful opportunity for families in our community. It's the first of its kind in the state of Mississippi. And I'm very thankful to our supervisors, our county government, who were willing to make that investment in our families.
Well, that's incredible. It's an amazing use of use of a repurposing a center that can only benefit families there. Judge Favre, as we end our portion of the interview here, I wonder if you might speak just a bit to what some of the challenges are that you continue to face and how you're looking forward to addressing those.
Sure. Our challenge is probably not unique to us, but I think the biggest challenge we face is the lack of evidence-based treatment options for parents who suffer from substance abuse disorders. Our county does not have any residential treatment facility or option, and the outpatient options are very few and far between. We are working, though, to implement more best practice standards for treatment courts into our practices, and hope to provide an intensive outpatient treatment court option in collaboration with a nationally recognized university medical center. So this is something I'm working on, trying to put the pieces together and work on the funding. But to accent those treatment options, we would look to build a multidisciplinary parent support system or model, including a substance abuse social worker and program director who will build a support team around our drug-addicted parents.
Amazing. I once again just want to congratulate you and the whole team in Hancock County for the tremendous work that you've embarked on, for the humanity that you display for all of us, which should be a lesson for the entire country as we look forward to a reimagined child welfare system in the world that we live in. So thank you so much again, Judge Favre, and I look forward and fully intend to follow your progress going forward here. So.
Thank you, Dr. Milner. It's my privilege.
Okay, great. So at this point, I believe we will transition our interview over to some discussion with Lanie Roussel, who is a parent attorney in Hancock County. Lanie, you know from the federal government how much we value the work that you and other parent and child attorneys out there are doing. We changed our policy a while back to allow federal funding to cover a portion of the cost of providing attorneys for parents and children, and that's based on a firm belief that every parent and every child in the court system needs to be represented, needs to have a voice, and someone who is there to advocate on their behalf. So congratulations to you on the work that you're doing. I mentioned to you earlier, I remember the day quite well when parents in Hancock County did not have attorneys representing them. So the progress in that area is just astounding at this point, and I'm so happy to be able to understand from your perspective what that has been like. I wonder if you might tell us just a little bit about how working in Judge Favre's court has changed your philosophy about working with parents.
Right. Well, first, Judge Favre is incredible to work for. You know, he has a passion and a love for this job, so I would not want to be anywhere else right now. You know, what I always wanted to do was to work with children, to advocate for children who couldn't advocate for themselves through the child welfare system. So I never really thought of representing parents as a way to advocate for the child. So when I came to Judge Favre's courtroom and the philosophy that he's instilled, you know, representing and fighting for the parents is ultimately fighting for that child. You're fighting for the family to either stay together or be reunited. And so, like you said, Judge gave me the credit of saying, you know, parents have a right to their children. Well, children have a right to their parents. And I will never forget the moment he told me that. You know, I work with so many incredible people. My clients are these incredible people. They're just in an awful situation at this point that we need to use the resources to get them out of.
Yeah, that's all too true in all locations around the country. Can you tell us just a little bit about how you approach your individual work as an attorney representing parents?
All right, so I take a really big collaborative approach. It's very different than when you're attorneys. When somebody mentions attorneys, they're saying, oh, you got to be adversarial. That's not necessarily what you need to do in the youth court process for dependency cases. So what I do is I try to get everything taken care of before we come to court. So there isn't an adversarial or some type of surprise. Nothing moves if we're not collaborating. So what I do is I work daily with CPS, daily with CASA. We have we have resource centers in our community, which we're very blessed to have. So I'm working with them daily. We make sure to go to family team meetings, have those regularly. Foster care reviews I attend. I even attend IEP meetings with clients so my parents can understand what their child needs through the education system. And then I also travel. The clients are the big voice of the case. They need to know what's going on. So traveling to their homes if transportation is an issue, travel to hospitals, rehabs, just to make sure they understand where we're at in the process because it is scary for them. So if CPS and everyone is on the same page when we get to court, it makes the process go smoother and a lot faster. Now, there are some cases, don't get me wrong, that, I have to be adversarial for the client, but ultimately it seems that the collaboration is what's working right now.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Sounds like you're doing exactly what we've all been advocating that attorneys do, as opposed to sometimes meeting their families a few minutes before a court hearing. So it's so incredible to hear that you're that proactive in the work. It's also good to hear that you are promoting a collaborative approach. How are you able to do that? How are you able to foster collaboration when you're working with a variety of agencies and entities there?
Well, when I first came into the position, there seemed to be a lot of distrust or not communicating with the attorney. So for me, the communication is key. Not only do I have to build this trust with the client, I have to build a trust with each agency I work for, whether it's CPS or CASA, the resource centers, doctors, if providers are involved. So for me, it's that daily conversation. It's not, oh, this case just went, so I'm not going to pick it up another month. It's what do we need to do next? So I think that communication is key. Like I said, it's been favorable outcomes for the families thus far. So I just keep trying to enforce that and make sure all avenues of communication are open.
Yeah, outstanding. That's great. Going back to the video, we saw in the video that the couple featured there came into the court situation feeling angry, probably for a lot of different reasons, feeling very distrustful of the whole system. What did you do to try and gain the trust and respect when you were working with Ms. Vaughn and Mr. Moran?
So as you have stated, that is correct. When I came in, their case was already kind of halfway through. So I inherited this case, and it was actually my first reunification case, which is even more exciting for me. They were hurt. They were very distrustful. So I took them in the conference room we have here at the courthouse, and I told them, I sit them down. I say, first, let me introduce myself. Second, I'm here for only you. I'm not here for the agencies. I'm not here for anybody else but you and your family. So you have to establish that trust, and that's what I did. She, Kat did not feel like she was being advocated for within the courtroom. So that day in court, unfortunately, it was the first day I didn't meet them inheriting the case, but I made sure I was vocal, advocated what their questions were. I make sure the clients have a pen or a paper near me so they can talk to me during the hearings because their voice is important too as much as the child. So that's how I built that trust from day one. You have to. You give them your communication, whether it's emails, phone calls, text, and you check in regularly to know that you care.
Yeah. Well, I wish that were the norm, and I think we're moving in the direction that hopefully it can be with all families. Has your work with that particular family changed the way you work with families in general in any way?
I don't know if I can say that it changed the way, because I did start out just trying to be collaborative, trying to get everyone on the same page. So it has reassured me that this is the way it works. So I make sure to keep that line going. This position in youth court is tough. The expectations are tough. However, it is some of the most rewarding work that anyone can do. My clients come to court, they're terrified. They think they're going to get berated in front of all these people. So the first thing I do is I make sure to tell them what Judge's philosophy is. That is, families come first. Let's try to maintain those kids. What's the safety risk? Can we eliminate them? And then the second thing is I tell them we're a team, and Judge does reiterate that to them. You know, CPS and everybody is sat, you know, they sit around the room in the courtroom, and it's terrifying. These people have their entire lives, every detail, every mistake in front of them. So if we tell them that this is a team, that we're not here to try to take your children and never return them, you know, they start opening up. They start believing what we believe in our work.
Yeah. Well, I think just in listening to you and Judge Favre talk about what you're doing, how you do it, and why you do it, it seems very clear to me that you've dealt with some root cause issues that sometimes lead to bad outcomes for children and families, and that is our values and our perspectives. I can't tell you how encouraging it is for me to hear both of you speak so compassionately about families and with such great understanding and insight into the difficulties that they experience and the trauma that our kids so often experience. I think we have to deal with that before we can ever get down to the mechanics of how we change a system, and it's clear to me that that's where you are, and that is probably where you're going to remain. So let me just both of you once again tremendously for sharing your experience there. I hope that folks in the who are participating in the webinar can get a real sense of how far you've come in such an incredibly short period of time. To me, that's evidence that with the right mindsets, the right intentions, and you don't always have to have a tremendous amount of resources to be doing. It'd be nice to have more resources, but you've done, I think, by changing mindsets, changing approaches, and giving families a fundamentally different experience in the child welfare system than they would have had otherwise. So thank you for that work, and thank you once again for sharing with us today for National Foster Care Month in the country. Jennifer,
thank you for having us.
Yeah, I believe that's my cue to turn things back over to you.
Yes, thank you. So we have about 10 minutes for question and answer with our presenters, and we've gotten lots of great questions come in through the chat. So I am going to just go ahead and start asking you some questions. So Lanie, the first one is for you. As a question about, do you represent both parents in the same case? And do the children get a separate representative? And if so, do the parents and children's representatives work together? Okay, so yeah, this is it depends type of answer that they usually give us in law school, but there are cases that I can represent both parents. I take each parent separately and ask them whether they believe it's a conflict, and again, it depends on the circumstances, situations, whether they're married. So a lot of factors play into that, but yes, there are cases that I do represent parents, both of them. Also, the child does have an attorney. They have a guardian ad litem, and I do work hand in hand with that guardian ad litem to see if we are on the same page, what concerns she has for the best interest of the child. That way we can present it to the court or try to figure out which way we can, if the concern is safety of the best interest of the child for their attorney, how can I help with my clients to eliminate that safety risk? Great. Thank you so much, Lanie. Judge Favre, the next question is for you. We had a lot of folks I think surprised about monthly hearings, and so just wondering, that sounds impossible at first, and so how do you make that work, and how long do the monthly hearings take?
So how do I make it work? We just do it. It's actually not as burdensome as you think, but to get to the second part of the question, I think that might give you some indication of how you could, if you're a judge out there, how you could manage a docket like that. The hearings are scheduled for 1 hour increments. So I do not like the idea of a cattle call type docket where every parent shows up at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock and has to wait outside. That means they're losing, income or, having to make some difficult decisions to get to court. So we schedule them out throughout the day, and they're scheduled in 1 hour increments. And for the most part, 1 hour does give me a good opportunity to connect with the family, hear about their compliance, but it's not uncommon to go further than an hour, in particular when there's a bit of inspiration needed or there are issues that need to be addressed. We'll take the time we need. I never, ever want a parent to feel like they're being rushed through a court process. That's not good. So we definitely want to make sure we have enough time, and 1 hour has seemed to be a good fit.
Great. Thank you so much, Judge. So the next question is for either Judge Favre or Lanie. Maybe one of you guys can answer this question. One of our participants was talking about siblings, and so what are we doing to hear the voice of a sibling that feels enormous responsibility for their younger siblings? It's an enormous emotional responsibility.
So I guess a situation where one sibling is in custody and the other is not, is that?
Yeah, I'm thinking that like an older sibling, yeah.
Well, I mean, we've had instances, I'm thinking of one case, I know Ms. Roussel's thinking, where the older sibling was able to serve as placement. And so we definitely heard her voice in the courtroom because I encourage foster parents to participate. But as far as hearing siblings, I mean, it's not very common that we have just one sibling in custody and not the others. But in those situations, or some other situation you might be able to think of, Brenda's house actually could create a venue for the siblings to visit. So outside of general parent time, we also have that resource to offer for siblings to be able to visit. But as far as in the courtroom, it's kind of a rare occasion. You might have stimulated something that I need to look at, but it's not very common for an older sibling to come into the court to address the court.
Great, thank you so much. And you mentioned something in your response that relates to another question that came in, was around do you require foster homes, foster families to attend monthly hearings, and what about relatives and kin care providers?
Okay, so like I said, I think the input that a foster parent has is very important, and it also gives me an opportunity to gauge where that foster parent is in the process, because we want to make sure that foster parents understand that they are a support. They are keeping the child safe while we work with the parent. So we want to hear from them. We want to make sure that they're on board with the teamwork that we set into place. We do not require them to be here. We do send the notice that is required by law and make it available to them to participate. I would say that we have a pretty high participation rate, and currently during this COVID crisis, we've learned that this actually makes it easier for the foster parents to participate in the process. They won't have to travel if they're placed outside of our county, and they don't have to travel. It's easier for them to just jump on the Zoom call and listen to what's going on and provide necessary information to the court that might be helpful to address any issues that may be ongoing with that child.
Great, thank you. Lanie, anything from your perspective on foster family involvement to share?
Yeah, that's the one thing that we do try to reiterate to foster parents, that they are part of this team, that they're not supposed to be a barrier to a reunification, such as visitations, making sure, they're helping. I understand schedules get kind of conflicted, but I definitely reiterate that Judge has stated that's a main thing that they need to understand as well, is they're part of the team, and we want them to help the family as much as possible with that reunification.
Great, thank you so much. Another question for either of you is, how has this affected the time towards reunification or the time a family stays in the system after reunification?
So, you want me to take that one, Mr. Roussel?
Yeah, you can take it, Judge.
So this is kind of a tricky question because, when you look at data, there's always some other story going on behind the data. And so, if you think about the things I've said today, if we're taking fewer kids into custody, that should mean that it's a harder case, right? That it's a more complicated case, or that could be the situation. So I think the cases where we have children in custody, there's just a lot more work to do. And so I don't think that's going to necessarily abbreviate the timelines. I'm very clear with parents at the beginning about what our statutory timelines are so that they understand that. I do think the resources we have here in our county do lend to a quicker reunification, and like Brenda's house, maintaining the visits, and then getting the other resources we have, like we have a resource center that helps with navigating for the parent, in particular if housing is an issue. But as much as a data person I am, I don't have a statistic for you on how our reunification rate has shortened. But I do think the data would probably show that it's shortened somewhat. The problem is because we have we had a backlog for a great period of time with the older cases, and so that created a problem on kind of looking at our data. It was hard to sift through, how to look at our data given the mix of old cases and new cases.
Great. Thank you, Judge Favre. Well, I think we could sit here and probably talk with you all day, but we are nearing the end. So Judge Favre and Lanie, thank you guys so much, not only for your time today, but also for everything you do. And I'm going to turn it over to Associate Commissioner Milner for some closing remarks.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much again, and thanks for all the participants on the line. I've followed your very thoughtful commentary in the chat room, and that's incredibly encouraging to see those reactions, and in most situations that affirmation of this incredible work that's going on. I've mentioned for the last 3 years in the Children's Bureau, we have been on a mission to promote strengthening families, ideally before they ever get to the foster care system, but certainly when they are in the foster care system, to support them with the opportunity to get what they need and to be reunified safely with their children. To see the examples of that come into life out there is affirmation for me, for us in the Children's Bureau, that we are in fact promoting the right kinds of things when we can see and hear what an incredibly different experience that children and parents have in this kind of an environment as opposed to many others out there that might not be nearly as supportive. And another incredibly important lesson here is that I think this is an example where courts absolutely can lead the way. I happen to know that as incredible as Judge Favre is, he needed a whole team behind him to make this happen, and he would be the absolute first to say that. The courts can step out front and say, we're going to serve children and families in a different way, and then bring together the key partners in a community that are essential to ensuring the well-being of children and families who live there. Agencies can also take that lead, but I think the key is having similar goals, having a similar vision, and having that commitment to move forward to serve children and families in humane and compassionate ways. I think we have to start with values, and we have to end with values, because our values drive what we do. They tell us what we think is right and not right. And if our values are in the right place and we're committed to them, I believe that we will find a way to make that happen. To end, I want to offer just so much admiration for our many resource families out there that are working every day to assure that children and families have a positive experience given whatever their circumstances are. Resource families and children's parents can absolutely work together. I love Judge Favre's earlier comment about how to make some of those things happen. And he said we can start out by making it an expectation. And I think that where we have seen that playing out in very positive ways, it has become the expectation and often led by resource families themselves. So thanks to all of you, the child welfare workforce, the courts, our resource families, our children, families, and youth who make up this thing that we call a child welfare system, and for being with us today as we celebrate the opportunities that we have going forward for a very different kind of a foster care system in our country. And thanks for letting me be a part of that as well. Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Milner. I know we are running out of time, so I just wanted to mention that all of the resources are in the pod for your reference. We'll also be sending out materials afterwards. We do have the agencies in court putting families front and center, the National Foster Care Month mosaics that we showed today, as well as the New York ones, and a discussion guide that you can utilize in your work. So we will send all of that information out after the webinar, and then we do have an evaluation. It would be great to have you all fill that out to let us know how it went and how we can continue to improve. So thank you all very much for attending today. We do have a slide with the presenters' email addresses that you can utilize if you'd like to follow up. And thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.